Hey guys, today in this video I'm going to be showing you guys how to replace rotted roof sheathing. I'm going to be going over the step-by-steps. I'm going to give you guys some quick tips as well along the way. So this particular roof sheathing is not below an attic, so you're not going to have to worry about replacing any of the framing members or the insulation. This video is simply going to cover how to replace the rotted roof sheathing. You can see the extent of the wood rot is pretty severe though. It does cover a decent amount of panel size, so we're gonna have to go ahead and replace that for sure. So the first thing I'm doing is just prepping my work area, making sure there's nothing that I can slip on. So I'm just sweeping the area, making sure my work area is clean. So the first thing you see me doing here is I'm taking a drill and I'm removing that step flashing that was previously on the roof before. And the reason why I have to do that is because in order to cut at that sheathing and remove that sheathing, I'm gonna need to be able to have access pretty much to the back side of that. So by removing here using a hammer, I'm taking out the step flashing that was previously on that roof, and we're gonna install a new one. That way we can have a better sealed at that, pretty much at that entry point. The next thing I'm doing is I'm taking the plywood and I'm gonna measure out where I'm gonna cut exactly on that damaged roof area. So I'm just putting this plywood all the way up in the corner. I'm going to use my foot to tap, use my hammer to tap, and make sure it's lined up properly. And then once I go ahead and do that, I'm going to go ahead and grab a Sharpie, and I'm going to go ahead and mark the dimensions out on the outline of that plywood, all the way from one corner to the other corner. So the next thing you're going to want to do is grab your chainsaw, and on that line that we drawed out with that plywood for the dimensions, we're going to go ahead and cut out that piece of old plywood that's rotted. And we're going to make sure to not go too deep. That way we're not cutting the trusses. We're going across this line that we created. That way when we go ahead and push the underlayment, or when we go ahead to do the demolition of the rotted plywood, you should be able to step on it, push it down in, and it should be able to fall out. So just make sure that when you are taking that chainsaw, the main important is not to go too deep, like I said. That way you're not damaging the trusses below. So after you do the demolition, we're going to install this new step flashing like I talked about earlier, and the main thing is we're going to want to make sure it goes right up under the drip edge on the previous roof next to this roof. So that's what we're doing now. We're making sure it's right up under there before we go ahead and apply the plywood on top of the trusses. So we're going to go ahead and do that right now. So after you go ahead and you install that step flashing, we're going to go ahead and nail the plywood to the truss. So the main thing is you want to make sure that it's flush to the roof, that it's not sticking out, there's no gaps, there's no cracks as well. You're going to be nailing 3 nails each truss, one in the middle, one on top, and one at the bottom. And that's pretty much going to give the adequate support for that plywood to stay secure. So here's a up close and personal look of these nails on the line, as you can see 3 in each line. Now I do want to mention I'm nailing 3 nails per truss because my sheathing is a particularly small. It's not covering a vast area. Typically the rule of thumb is you want to space your nails every 6 inches in the center and 12 inches on the edges. So just keep that rule in mind if you are replacing sheathing on a bigger surface area than you see in this video. So after you do that, you're going to go ahead and install the underlayment. So what I'm doing here, and I'm pressing on the underlayment, and I make sure to activate the adhesive. That way it can stick to the sheathing. Now I'm using a synthetic underlayment. Now one thing that you need to follow when you go ahead and install the other underlayment next to it, you need to make sure if you are on a 4 to 12 pitch roof or higher, you could overlap about 2 inches. If you have a low slope roof like me, you need to overlap about 19 to 18 inches. So just make sure you go ahead and do that. So right now I'm just lining up the underlayment on the plywood and stepping down to activate the adhesive. So for this fix, I'm switching to an architectural shingle instead of a 3-tab. They last longer, and I'm going to be applying this shingle right on top of this underlayment. That's going to be the next step. So when you're doing this, you want to make sure that you're matching up directly in line with that underlayment. So take your time, because once this shingle sticks, it's going to be a lot more difficult to remove it. And so pretty much right now I'm just lining up to make sure that everything is aligned correctly. I'm peeling off the shingles, I'm applying the stickiness, and I'm not overlapping these shingles, okay? So we're not overlapping them like the underlayment. You're going to go right here, line to line, like you see me doing, and I'm going to pretty much line up this white strip that you guys see. So as you guys can see, when you look to this white strip, they're lined up perfectly. And each shingle, like I said, we're not overlapping, but I'm not leaving any cracks whatsoever. The white tape is lined up, and the correct side with the architectural shingles facing towards me is down. So that's what you want to make sure you do. Follow all of those steps perfectly. That way you have the proper installation. Now, the other set of shingles will go on top of that white strip. So that's your marker. And after that, I'm going to go ahead and nail these shingles onto the underlayment and into the sheathing. So when you nail these shingles, you're nailing the spacing that you're going to be using 6 inches, okay? So you should get about 6 nails per shingle, unless you cut the shingle in half for any reason, if you're trying to fit it in a crevice. So you can see here, I have 1 nail right here at the edge. Always on the edges have a nail, and then I have 6 nails spaced 6 inches along that shingle across that entire white strip is what you're going to go ahead and do. Once you go ahead and do that, you're going to go ahead and get your second set of shingles. And like I talked about and mentioned earlier, you're going to line the architectural shingle up with that white strip that you nailed the previous shingles onto. So you can see here, I'm perfectly in line with that white strip. I'm not going to leave the white strip any of the visible. I'm going to go right in line with it, and then I'm going to repeat the same process by nailing every 6 inches on the other white strip on the other shingle that we just installed on that row above it. And you're going to repeat that process for the entire area that you're doing, and that's essentially how you're going to pretty much nail these shingles to the roof sheathing. After you got all the shingles in place, we need to focus on that step flashing. So what I'm doing here is I'm caulking right in between the crack of that step flashing. That way we're going to pretty much try and prevent leaks as much as possible. So I'm going to go across that whole entire step flashing before I nail it on top of the shingles and on top of the underlayment and everything that we have. Make sure to get the caulking installed. So last step, pretty much, we already applied the caulking up under that step flashing. So what we're going to go ahead and do now is nail that step flashing with some screws every 6 inches or so along the step flashing, that we can make sure it's completely flush. So here's the final results. Here's how it looks up under the roof. You can see all the wood rot sheathing has been removed. We also removed all the wood rot shingles, the underlayment as well. We replaced all of that. That way there's no leaks in the future. You can see this is how it looks on top. We installed the step flashing up under the drip edge. You can see we put all the proper screws in place every 6 inches on the shingles and the step flashing as well as the underlayment. So this is a tutorial that we went over to pretty much install and replace wood rotted sheathing. So that's pretty much it for this video, guys. I hope that this video went ahead and showed you exactly how to go ahead and replace an old rotted sheathing. If you don't want to get a completely new roof, this is something that you can do. If you have relatively a roof that's in good shape, if you just want to replace maybe a section that was damaged, maybe due to a hurricane or some wood rot, this is exactly the video for you guys. Now, I do want to mention, guys, this does not cover how to replace an entire roof. There are lots of other components that you would need to know in order to do that. This video is simple. It doesn't go over all the details as well, so it's not going to cover what type of shingles or what type of underlayment and where should the sheathing be facing. Those questions are going to have to be done a little bit of research. This video more so is going to go over the process.